Welcome to another episode of the Carpe Fide podcast, where if the shoe fits, you wear it.
And if the truth hurts, you bear it.
I am Justin Gruber.
And I am Jesse Gruber.
And today we hope you will seize the faith. Welcome, everybody, to episode 165 of the Carpe Fide podcast. I'm not flying solo this week. I got my wingman back.
It's a thruple.
Yeah, we're going to have a guest. We're going to have a guest on in a second, and
Anyway, I'm back.
So word choice is always important when recording anything for the internet. You know what, Jesse? It's okay, because one of the things I got in feedback from my solo episode, which, by the way, we'd still love feedback on.
I should listen to it.
One of the cool, bud. Thanks for that on the air too. Admitting to that one.
Busy. That's literally the reason I didn't record. Is because I've been busy.
Stink. All right, so not literally. You smell fine, just to be clear.
I appreciate that.
One of the things I did here was that there wasn't as much humor this time, and I'm like, well, I was talking about people killing babies, and also,
I wasn't there to make awkward jokes.
Also, so. I just kind of stayed on topic the whole time. It was crazy. Covered a lot of stuff in 40 minutes and got out. So, but you're here tonight, so I'm sure everything will get off topic and there'll be much humor.
Have no fear.
Jesse, this is one of the things I was thinking about with a podcast. You know how like podcasts do ad read?
Yeah, I've heard some of them do that.
I just can never figure out, because some podcasts do them at the beginning, and some try to throw them in the middle, and some try to throw them at the end.
Yeah.
Like when have you found is a good time to do an ad read on a podcast?
So if I am listening to a podcast that has ads, I prefer it to be in the beginning and nowhere else so that I can skip it.
Huh. I guess that's a great spot for an ad read.
I hate it when they put it in the middle and it surprises me, and then I'm like, now I have to like figure out what's going on.
You know, there was a lot of bombs being dropped on Israel today. That was kind of cray-cray. Did you hear about that?
I've heard about the bombs, yes.
Yeah, and you know what? With overseas wars, open borders, foreign and billionaire-owned farmland, assassination attempts on current/former/current presidents, it really helps in these turbulent times to be prepared now more than ever. And that's why we're letting you know about a company, offgridwarehouse.com. They have your back. They offer top quality duty gear, medical supplies, and tactical gear, trusted by military, first responders, and civilians alike. Whether you're preparing for the unexpected or need to be ready for action in a moment's notice, they've got everything you need. From long-term food to bug-out bags, body armor, emergency first aid, trauma kits, you can trust their products in the most dire situations. So don't wait until it's too late. Gear up today at offgridwarehouse.com. And you're like, well, that's weird. They've never done an ad read. And that's right. We haven't. But I know both these guys. They're really awesome. I literally deliver the products. The products are actually what they say they are. They're name brand. They're quality products that these guys have tested, used, and can teach you how to use properly. So, like, hey, maybe you're a guy that wants to be prepared.
You said duty.
I did say duty. Maybe you're a guy that maybe you're just a solo dude that wants to be prepared. You want to have your families ready. You need a tourniquet. Maybe you're like, a tourniquet? What's a tourniquet? Either way, go to Off Grid Warehouse. You can actually ask these guys exactly what the product is and how it functions. Hey, if you're a part of a firehouse, if you're a first responder of any kind, you need bulk supplies. These guys have got what you need.
Like supplies to bulk up or supplies?
No, bulk supplies. Like, let's say you're in a major city and you're like, wow, tourniquets, we need 1,000. They've got your back. That's what I'm saying.
Making my way downtown, walking past pallets of bricks.
Yeah, where did the bricks come from? Nonetheless, you can go to offgridwarehouse.com. You can use code CF10 for 10% off any purchase that you'd like to make there. And again, I will say, Joe and Pete are awesome guys. They do a lot of business and they have a lot of stuff. So if you have a question about, hey, do I even really need this? Or is there a better version of this? Go ahead and ask them. They have the right answers.
Wait, what's the website? I'm going to go to it right now.
Offgridwarehouse.com. Off-grid, like if you want to go off-grid, warehouse.com. All one word, but it's actually three.
I got it.
Yeah, it's a good stuff. Also check them out on Instagram. If you want to see videos of like how to apply a tourniquet, they literally do that kind of stuff.
Look at this Instagram.
So kind of crazy. they're super awesome dudes. And just wanted to send you that way. Because honestly, this is crazy times. And speaking of crazy times, we wanted to have
welcome to the Carpe Fide podcast.
This is a hard segue, but it's really not, because
you have emergency
in
food for your
crazy
dog.
times, somebody you need to talk to, someone you really want on your side, is the Italian Stallion himself. The Italian Stallion, none other than Andrew Debartolo, or you may know him as the Maple Theonomist. The Maple Theonomist himself.
You're killing this intro, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Great. Andrew's going to come on tonight. He's got a couple articles out there. He's got a topic he really wants to engage over, and we're really excited to have him on. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing well. All that I'm curious if those guys deliver up to Canada. I'm in the market for some hard body armor. I have a plate carrier. I've been updating it a little bit. I'm looking for some plates and some extra bullets. I just got my membership to the local gun club, so I'm as ready as I can be up in Canada.
Which is, you know what? You never know when a moose or a mounted police is going to be around trying to,
curb stop you.
kill you. So it's always important to be prepared in Canada. Canada. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no,
We'll let you know.
That's what they do. That's what they do. I'm not actually sure about the international shipping.
If
I
they
did
don't
actually warn them in
they
advance.
don't. I know a guy.
I'm just saying. I warned them in advance. A lot of our listeners are the Great White North, and they need to be prepared for those types of conversations. So they have been forewarned, just so you know, all of our listeners. You have been on quite a bit of, you just have been making some serious rounds since we last talked to you. Why don't you catch up our audience on where you're at now? Because it is not where you were the last time.
No, last time we had a conversation, I was inside the office at my church in Kingston.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, our church merged with another church about an hour and a half north of us. And my family and I have moved to the other end of the province. And we are in the wonderfully warm Windsor. So I think we're actually south of where you guys are. It's warmer where we are than where you are. So we're here in Windsor, and I am still doing work with Liberty Coalition Canada, still the director of operations. We still have our podcast that we host, still working with churches. We just ran a series of conferences this last summer. We were in 3 spots across the country. The name of the conference was Politics in the Pulpit. So talking about Christian political cultural engagement. And just this last September, which I can say now because we're no longer in September, I began teaching at the classical Christian school at my church. I'm the 7-8 teacher, and I'm also doing worldview stuff with the high schoolers, including a New Testament survey this year. So different location, different work, lots of different stuff. We also, since we moved here, this would be another thing. When we moved here, my wife was pregnant with twins, and now the twins are crawling all over the place. So we have 5 out of the womb kids in a new home, new city, new job, new school, new church, lots of new things. It's been the year of change and transition in the non-purple haired woke kind of way.
Super cool.
Yeah. All original hair colors. I like that. That's good. Although I do appreciate the people with the purple hair. It makes me know that they don't agree with me. So that's just like a giant red, easy to sign. Like everything they say will be based on subjectivity, and that's important to know. That's a lot of new. On top of that, just you've been really kind of hitting up this idea that you've postulated, and I really like it. That's the title of our episode today: Young, Restless, and Red Pilled. So we've got red
peeled. Oh, geez, who are we peeling?
Pilled. And we're really. What is wrong with you?
Well, he peeled the faces off of the people.
Hello, Clarice. You make me do this. You make me do this. We really wanted to kind of get an understanding of it, because you've been kind of communicating this idea, since much earlier in this year. Now you've got the second article about it. What are you seeing that has caused you to view some people as young, restless, and red-pilled?
So where it all kind of began was actually coming out of some of the COVID madness. One of the things that happened up here in Canada is we started connecting with other like-minded pastors and churches that stayed open, that defied some of the lawless, unscientific COVID mandates. And so as we started kind of banding together and connecting, we started seeing a lot of similarities between us in terms of our soteriology, maybe eschatology as well. And as happens during peacetime, right, during wartime, you kind of put some of the differences aside and you're focused on the enemy in front of you, which is the state who's, forcing poison in you. But when the water's a little calmer, now all of a sudden you have the time to disagree, and the differences theologically start to come out. And sometimes they come out and it's, you believe this and we believe this, and that's great. And other times it comes out and it's a little more problematic. So what I started seeing initially was people of a certain theological stripe were looking at others who were also bold, who also were faithful in keeping their churches open, who may have differed in some areas. And the perspective on them, in my estimation, was a very uncharitable, condescending, kind of juvenile one. So just some examples, and I raised this in the first article, that I happen to be of the optimistic amillennial persuasion. That's my eschatology. And it just so happens that some of the more triumphalist post-millennial guys would kind of look at the amillennial or the premillennial, the historic premillennial, and say, you guys really are inconsistent because your cultural engagement involved in politics, the gospel's effective, we can have Christian institutions. That's a post-millennial idea. And so you're either being inconsistent or you're confused. And if you keep going, eventually you'll become post-mill. And I found that to be condescending. I mean, I'm not a young man. I've been a believer for a while. I've thought deeply about my convictions. So I'm like, okay, that's problematic. I also heard similar sentiments coming from certain branches of baby baptizers who would say, listen, as a Baptist, we start talking about covenant theology and raising your kids in a Christian home and expecting that they'll come to faith and treating them like Christians, you're being inconsistent, right? That's not the Baptist way. And I thought, okay, that's the problem. I mean, Baptists have been thinking about this for 500 years, especially. We have a whole system of belief, a whole confession that was written almost 500 years ago. So it's not a new thing. So I started seeing this come about where it was very condescending, and it was gross, and I think it was unbefitting of Christians. So as I was seeing this happen in our kind of circle of kind of non-conformist, we kind of called ourselves the Billies. That was a name that we were given, those guys who were defiant of the state mandate. So that's happening over here. And what I also saw happening was the swelling up of the red-pilled manosphere in the culture. And so the fame of guys like Andrew Tate, or the Fresh and Fit podcast, Myron Gaines, or even guys like Joe Rogan and even Jordan Peterson, that I would say is a much more mild version of that men who'd been told that they were basically the oppressor, misogynist, toxic for a generation now, found comfort in these guys who were saying, well, feminism is cancer and patriarchy is good and traditional gender roles are good. And so these guys began to grow in their appeal. So I see these two things happening, one distinctly in the culture, and in the church, the response among believers who were faithful. And what I essentially noticed was that tendencies in the red-pilled manosphere were also manifesting among this group of Christians of various theological flavors. And so as I started seeing this overlap, my mind went back to the Young, Restless, and Reform movement of the early 2000s, and seeing again some similarities where the Young, Restless, Reform movement, in essence, was a reaction to feminism in the church. It was a reaction to the seeker-sensitive movement. It was a reaction to soft preaching, a low view of the sovereignty and holiness of God. And the Young, Restless, and Reform movement was these young men, primarily, who heard the passionate preaching of men like John Piper, and they are inspired because of his high view of the person of God, and his high view of the scriptures, and his willingness to delve into theology. And so they're excited by this. And then what they do is they respond, but they over-respond. They overreact to what's happening in the culture as it comes into the church. And the overreaction is problematic. So I see that in the original Young, Restless, Reform movement. There's a lot of good stuff that comes out of it, but the overreaction is a problem. And, the vast majority, if not all, of some of the big names in the original YRR movement, they've drifted either into wokeism, or they've really cozied up with wild charismatics, or they've been disqualified from ministry, or they were very soft and squishy on COVID. So the overreaction that I don't think was grounded in something really substantive, it shows over time. So I saw the same thing kind of brewing in this new Young Restless, and I called it Red Pilled Movement, because even though a lot of the guys who are, the rock stars of this movement are also reformed, they would say, I saw these red pilled tendencies where it was again a hyper reaction, a hyper masculine reaction to ills in the culture and as they're infiltrating the church. And so I released that article in April, but I had been thinking and planning and brainstorming for months. I mean, it actually, when this first came to my mind, would have been all the way back in October. So a year ago, I was at a men's conference and I had a discussion, and I was standing around afterward with a bunch of guys, and they were all, super triumphalist post-mill guys. And they're talking and they're basically saying to me, keep coming, Andrew. I know you're all-mill, but just keep coming. You'll eventually make your way all the way here. And, you're not being consistent, and your all-millennialism is inconsistent. And I find myself looking at these guys. They were all younger than me. They're all in their early 20s, mid-20s. And I'm kind of looking at these guys thinking, I'm not old, but I've been married for almost 15 years. I have 5 kids. I've served in vocational ministry for 15 years. I've also served as a campaign manager for someone who ran for a provincial election. I've trained people who've run in municipal elections. I've been to protests. I've had interactions with Antifa members. And I didn't say this to these guys, but I thought, you haven't done a fraction of the real cultural engagement, like the real hands in the dirt kind of work that I've done. And I was in Bible college. I was in vocational ministry doing the real nitty gritty of working with families whose daughters had miscarriages and other significant issues of death and loss when you were still in diapers. And so you're a little boy, and you've just stumbled into a theological system, and you're really jazzed about it. But you need to settle down. You got to calm down, grow up a little bit. You're acting like a jerk, and you're acting immature. And I found myself saying, how dare these young, kind of proud, immature men. And so that was when that was the first time I thought, okay, this is happening. I'm seeing this response to people who aren't as red pilled as they are. So months and months I thought. And so I finally put that article out, anticipating that there'd be some pushback, anticipating that friends of mine who are kind of in that camp might not like it. But I saw more and more of a problem, that if the church tries to respond to evils in the culture, even as they're creeping into the church, by adopting a similar perspective or similar tactics in the world, and if it looks more like Andrew Tate than it does faithful biblical Christianity, I felt I had to say something about it, because I'm not that old. In many ways, a lot of the guys who are pushing this kind of thinking are my age. So I felt, as someone who's a contemporary, who's similar in age, I can speak to it. And what they can't say to me is, oh, you're just an old boomer, which is exactly what they say to guys who disagree, who are older. So that's a little bit of the history behind what led to the writing of that first article. And at the point where I said, I have to say something now, because I'm seeing it really affect young men, and it's not going to end up well for them, that they might flame out, and they might find themselves also veering too far into unbalanced territory. And so I needed to say something about it.
I think I agree with your analysis, and I apologize if it came to you from America, or if it was, something that was separate from this American movement. I feel like I see it here too. It's like, I listen to the messages of guys like Eric Kahn, Brian Sauvé, Michael Foster, who I think Michael Foster's toned down a bit recently, which is pretty cool to see that kind of correction there. But I think that even something like a Moscow, Idaho, where I find Doug Wilson to be, I certainly don't agree with him on everything, like I find him to be characteristic of an older godly man, right? He doesn't really put people down. He doesn't deride other Christians. You know, he derides worldly foolishness, but I don't really see him being you know, childish with other men of faith. And I think that bears a lot of maturity to it. But I see a lot of people who follow Doug Wilson, on the other hand, acting not like Doug Wilson in that. So it's like they want the punch, they want the you know, hard lines on theology, they want the edgy engagements and things like that, but it's almost like they don't have the maturity to go along and actually handle those conversations well. I don't know. What do you think?
Actually, Alex Klusum and I have talked about this quite a bit, that what it seems is if men like Wilson, who, and I'll be the first to say, there are moments where I think there's certain things he has said and written that I think might be a little bit too much. I mean, overall, the evidence of his faithfulness and his commitment. He's served at his church for over 40 years. I don't know if you've ever been to Moscow, Idaho. I've been to Moscow. I spent a week there. They basically own the downtown core. Half of it is businesses with people who go to the church. I mean, there's a good thing happening there. And so the evidence of his faithfulness is there, even though there's some stuff that I may not agree with. But the work that he's done over decades, a lot of younger Wilsonites, both in Moscow and outside of Moscow, are almost riding on his coattails, punching people as they do. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like a child whose dad, you know, happens to be like a totally jacked up, super athletic, wealthy, you know, good looking bro, and he's just going around telling all the kids how, you know, terrible their dads are. My dad can beat up your dad, and you're stupid, and it's just like, okay, we get it. Your dad's awesome, but guess what? Your dad has done the work, not you, right? Mm-hmm. He did the work. You haven't done the work yet. And that's what I see. It's they want to ride on his success. Sorry, maybe not ride on his success, but he's put in the work, and he's put in decades of faithful ministry. And so that's why you see the fruit. And then other people who haven't done the work are standing on his shoulders, writhing about like it's a chicken fight in a swimming pool, but they're sitting on his shoulders, but they're the ones that are thrashing like children. And it's immature, and they haven't. I really think for a lot of these guys, especially guys who are in their mid-20s to mid-30s, I just think they haven't suffered or failed enough to mature. I think failing, suffering, the mileage in ministry and in life matures you, where if you have just recently stumbled into Reformed theology, right, you've just discovered the Puritans like they haven't been around for 400 years. And now all of a sudden, because, you know, you're feeding your baby's communion and you're doing covenant renewal family worship and your wife's putting on a head covering, now all of a sudden you're an expert who's been faithfully serving for decades, even though you just uncovered this 6 months ago. Like, just slow down, take a little bit of time, put some more years on it, grow up a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of the idea of playing the long game, right? But I mean, I don't think you're aware that head coverings actually erase immaturity. I didn't know if you knew that, but
are you saying I should put on a head covering? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying when you finally get your wife to put that head covering on, it erases, right, you know, the man's immaturity.
I got Jesse a head covering, and I even cut 2 eye holes out of it, and he can slide it right over. All the way, and but he doesn't wear it often, as he should. Yeah, basically, one of the things that Doug Wilson's always kind of been key on when he first started communicating that there needs to be an edge to how we deal with idolatry in the world, and he started talking about the serrated edge. He always said that there's a caution with the serrated edge, because you can essentially use a serrated edge to skin the game that feeds your family. But there's also a level of it where you can put the serrated edge in the hands of a serial killer, and the serrated edge, though it is a tool, can be used in both manners, and that can be a problem.
Yeah, a serial killer can wield it, or worse, a moron.
So all right. Kind of got us into why you wrote that initial article. One of the things you did a great job was laying out some core tenets that you see this. I want to be careful because like one of the questions and concerns I have is that the same kind of thinking you have towards them, they could look at you and say, look, just because you have a couple of years on you doesn't mean you actually have anything. It's all about the Bible, right? Like, and then they launch into their whole diatribe again. But you've identified.
You see the Crusades.
You see Hitler when he, the real problem.
Oh gosh.
You identified several like core principles that you see them kind of taking beyond a biblical paradigm and pushing into a territory that can open up them and additionally their ministry that they would seek to do to attacks from the world as well as not having the foundation of the good scripture under it to even hold it up in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you elaborate on some of those?
So the original article I wrote in April, and I had identified essentially 5 categories that I noticed, and again, I'd been thinking about since October. So that's November, December. It's 5 to 7 months of me dwelling and thinking and having discussions with other pastors. So I had 5 initially. I pared that down to 3 because I didn't want the article to be longer than it was, which is the longest one I've written to date. And so I just kind of, tucked these other 2 away and said, maybe they'll come out at some point. And then in light of recent developments that I'm sure we'll get into, I decided to pull one of those out of the closet and then deal with 2 new ones. So I would say that there are 4, between the 2 articles, there are 4 categories that I think are overreactions to what's happening in the culture that they would say are biblically grounded. And I think the positions in a balanced way are biblical. And people can have their different convictions, but when it goes too far. So the 4 that I would say exist between the 2 articles would be, the first one I've called a condescending postmillennialism. And the condescending postmillennialism is essentially to say that postmillennialism alone has the market on cultural engagement, building Christian institutions, and believing that the gospel will be successful and that we can be victorious in Christ, even on this earth in a physical way. That postmillennialism alone has the market on that. And I essentially said, first of all, that's historically laughable. Essentially, all of the apostolic fathers were premillennial. Augustine was amillennial. Many of the reformers were amillennial. The Puritans were, several Puritans were premillennial. Spurgeon was premillennial. So historically, unless you're going to say that all these men were mistaken or they were being inconsistent, I think that's a very foolish position to take. But essentially, it's this understanding of a kind of triumphalism that we can just march our way into a Christian nation and everything's just going to go up and up and up. And if you're optimistic, you're either post-millennial or you're inconsistent. So that was the first thing. And I said, I'm not post-millennial. I do the work of cultural engagement. We've seen some successes. I think it's condescending to say that I'm not being consistent or I'm really post-millennial. I just haven't realized it yet. The second one was what I called an overreacting patriarchy. And I mean, I didn't get into this in the article. I don't think that patriarchy and complementarianism are actually at odds. I think that patriarchy and complementarianism I think you're looking at 2 different things. I think patriarchy essentially is an understanding of how God has designed the world to work in terms of leadership structures. And I think that complementarianism specifically focuses in on the roles of men and women in the home and in the church. So in that regard, I don't think they're actually at odds, but this kind of patriarchy that says, unless your wife is wearing a head covering on Sunday morning and is most definitely not teaching other women about the Bible, but merely how to make a rockin' sourdough, that she has been compromised by feminism, which again is stupid. Because I would look at my own wife, for example, and say she's most definitely not been compromised by feminism, and we understand the way God's made the world and our family and our church to work, but she neither wears a head covering nor abstains from teaching other women what the Bible has to say about life and theology. So that was another issue. And then the I called it a myopic paedobaptism, which is the understanding that only the paedobaptist, only the Presbyterian can properly understand both covenant theology and raising kids in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. That Baptists, assume their kids are demonic little pagans, and Moses didn't say everyone can come through except for the babies. They have to stay on the other side of the Red Sea. It's just stupid stuff like that.
I would like to correct them there, because I think their kids are also evil little pagans. It's not just my kids. So I'm going to say, no. I
We
think
definitely
all,
don't have
your
the
kids,
market on that, yeah.
our kids, all the kids. Yep, demonic little pagans. Yep,
Yep.
terrorists. They would murder you in your sleep. They just lack the ability. It's just true.
Terrorists. They have political agendas.
It's not just my kids. I just want to be clear. It's not just our Baptist kids. It's like, oh no, also your Presbyterian kids, the same. same.
I kind of looked at that and I thought again, no, Baptists, Reformed Baptists for almost 500 years have a biblical response to rightly understanding covenant theology that is not the Westminsterian understanding of a covenant theology. And the reality is when I wrote the article, initially my wife was still pregnant with our twins, but my 3 older children, who at the time would have been 7, 9, and 11, they all profess faith in Christ. They've all been baptized. I raised them in a Christian home with an understanding of what it means to serve and love and obey Christ, and reading scriptures and praying and doing family worship. And I remember speaking with someone one time when my kids were younger, and he asked me, do you think your kids going to come to faith? I'm like, yeah, I don't have a doubt in my mind that they will come to love the Lord, because my wife and I do, and we will raise them in that home. And I know how God operates, and he tends to operate a certain way within families, but that's not a Presbyterian thing. And to say that if I'm not Presbyterian, I'm not doing covenant theology well with my kids, I think is, again, it's a little condescending. And then the fourth one that I addressed in the second article was what I called legalistic liturgy. And primarily what I addressed there is this kind of new resurgence of a Psalms only mentality with regard to singing in the church. And I say in the article, if that's your conviction, sing Psalms. If you want to sing hymns only, go for it. My preference is I love hymns. I love singing hymns, whether it's from the Reformation or from the Puritan era, or, the hymns of the late 1800s, early 1900s. Sure. If that's your preference. But if you're going to try to make the argument that unless you're singing hymns only, you're not being faithful and obedient, and you're not being biblical, and your worship is sub-biblical, I also try to make the case in the article that's actually, that position has zero biblical evidence. And there's some very key factors that show us that if you're going to say Psalms only, which is your preference, there are a few areas where you cannot make the argument that it's Psalms only or faithlessness. And so this kind of thinking, again, you may not have people who subscribe to all of them, but I seem to there seems to be this thread that guys who have adopted one of those positions in the overreacting, unbalanced kind of way have also adopted several of the other positions. And it's more uncommon to find a guy who says, I believe in one or two of these and not the other two. It's almost always the case that they're all in with all of them, with some exceptions. So that would kind of be some of the more, here's our biblical position that I think is, an overreaction. I think it's a little unbalanced and uncharitable. I think it's an uncharitable way to speak about other brothers who disagree in theology, but who in practice are exhibiting a faithful, optimistic cultural engagement. that it's very silly to say they're inconsistent, they're confused, or they just don't really understand what they believe. I mean, that's like, grow up. And I say in the article, just grow up, little boy. Like, you're not really winning any friends by doing this.
So if I was so, and by the way, in the article, one of the key takeaways here is to identify the reality. It's not that holding any of these positions as your personal view is the issue. One of the things that your article's been very clear about, it's that when you're taking these issues as essentials for faith or or so either orthodoxy or orthopraxy, then they become an issue, and that's where the uncharitableness has been coming into play a lot. Like, in other words, like you don't care if someone believes they should have the conviction that their wife should have their head covered, and their wife believes this and they have their head covered. You don't care. Like, that's not that's your personal conviction. I mean, you're not here to tell you to convince you otherwise about that. However, for you then to think that you need to enforce that as the holy writ on all of Christendom, and be a head covering evangelist is obviously an issue. And I think at this point, if you're involved in social media, and you have friends on social media, and you're a believer, and you've been out there with your beliefs and your faith, then you probably have a friend where you can say, yep, I know exactly the person that Andrew's talking about, because he's always out there railing against the latest thing that Taylor Swift did, or beating some flat earther over the head, or like, right. So I'm not saying flat earthers don't deserve to get beat over the head. I'm just saying that we know them, we see them.
Then we call them flat headers. After you beat no? Okay.
Yeah, it's there. It's still in the air. It hasn't quite landed yet, but it's up there. Jess.
Well, I was thinking.
Yep. No, we know it. You
Okay.
could. Yep.
I was thinking if you took like a
Yep.
flat shovel and you banged on the head of.
Yep, we got it.
It's a flat head.
Okay. So identifying this is for you hasn't necessarily been saying these are evil things. It's been these are the things that I say they have in common, and the things that they are then utilizing in a way where their energy is directed in a lack of Christian love towards others and the world.
Yeah, it's the overreaction. It's the overreaction. It's the venturing into an unbalanced, uncharitable. And another thing that marks it too is a kind of juvenile disrespect, specifically toward older believers who have proved their faithfulness over time. It's simply saying that they're either just boomers, or in some of the more recent cases, in egregious ways, saying that they're holding water for the Jews. It's really so. One particular example is the the NSA ad that featured Johnny Cash flipping the bird, and they're talking about the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger. Listen, I personally don't have any real strong feelings about that ad. I mean, the scripture. I mean, Paul tells the Judaizers to quite literally castrate themselves, and Elijah mocks the prophets of Baal and says, hey, maybe he's taking a dump, maybe he's asleep. Like, that's so I don't look at that and say, oh my, how dare they? I'm just like an old church lady. However, there are people, because of their convictions, I think in an understandable way, say this is a problem, right? So Justin Peters, for example, who certainly is not afraid to say something that'll get him in trouble, that's an unpopular position, who's been one of the stalwarts in exposing the danger and the demonic nature of the Word of Faith, health, wealth, prosperity movement, who's been faithfully doing that for decades. When he comes out and says, hey, I have a problem with this, I don't think this is how Christians should engage, and then someone says to him, pietism rots your brain, like, that's stupid, that's immature, that's very disrespectful, and it is unbecoming of a Christian. We can disagree, but I look at what the scriptures say about honoring the gray head and the way we're supposed to treat older men. And that's not the way we're supposed to treat older men, certainly not in public. I mean, if you want to privately pull them aside and say, I think you're really wrong, but to publicly come at someone who's had decades of faithfulness, costly faithfulness, also marks this movement. And it's a very young, braggadocious, immature kind of movement that does not rightly, I think, respect men that have earned that respect over years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think a great way to handle that is to say, Justin Peters, I don't agree with you, but I really appreciate your ministry, and then move on with life. Because at the end of the day, like, we're talking about these things, like, it doesn't. If NSA puts that out, I just don't understand. Like, I don't have to defend it, but I can say that honestly, like, much like you, I have no problem with it. In fact, I agree with it, and I'm on board with it, and I'm okay if you're not, because I feel like you're probably interacting with a totally different group of people that you speak that a different way too. Like, I'm okay with
You
that.
mean your first reaction wasn't to just deride somebody who thought differently of you?
Oh, you don't. I mean, I can
The leftists do.
I can clearly make biblical cases and arguments of things that are far worse than our cultural view of the middle finger to idolatry. Like, the Bible is very things the prophets said, which makes them, literally God's word that's written down in God's word, are worse than this. So I make that biblical argument, but ultimately it's like, I don't need to. Like, most of the people that the NSA is trying to reach are not you,
Justin Peters.
Right? Like, Justin Peters isn't like, well, no, I rescind my application. And I say, like, he wasn't doing that anyway. Like, he's saying his opinion, and he's allowed to have an opinion. Like, people are allowed to have opinions, and you're allowed to not agree with them, and you don't have to be a jerk about it.
And that's how good conversation happens. So there's a difference between having a good conversation about something you disagree with another person, and then there's, kind of like what the examples that you've been given. It's this meme culture. It's this almost like flippant attitude towards, not only ideas, which should be rationalized and thought through with scripture, not memes generally, if you're going to be a serious person.
I mean, you can make a meme with scripture.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we've done it. But also I agree that there is a lack of an understanding as to how to, not just in a politeness way, but in a biblical way, treat an older person, just in general. I don't think young people were raised with any sort of etiquette, let alone a biblical framework of etiquette as to how to be respectful to another person.
Well, because a lot of these guys, and I include myself in this generation. So technically, I'm the last year of the millennial generation. So technically, I'm a millennial. I remember telling some people from church, they're like, "Oh, that explains it." Like, I'm just right at the tail end of being a millennial. But people my age, the generation and the half generation younger than me, what we've basically been taught is that the older generation in every way has completely failed us. That's what we've been taught in every way. They failed us economically, they failed us spiritually, they failed us emotionally. And listen, I was at a political party convention where they invited me to speak, and I essentially said we need to be honest about the failures of our parents and our grandparents, and how in many ways they have handed down to us both a culture and a lack of being equipped to deal with it. So I'm not saying we need to paint everything with this kind of rosy colored paintbrush, but what I am saying is, when you've been taught that everything that all of these older people have ever done has been wrong and has been to your detriment, then obviously you're not going to respect them. You're not going to value them. You're not going to want to listen to what they have to say, because they're a part of the problem. They're a part of the post-war consensus. They've just imbibed that so much. So you're not going to respect them. Why would you? And that, unfortunately, is a marker of the red pill manosphere. The red pill manosphere is marked by a youth that, the way they speak to women is gross. The way they engage with older people is pretty despicable. And so that seems to have crept into this thinking as well.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've been thinking about when it comes to a lot of these reactions is just like the word that keeps popping into my mind is like this immaturity. right? This immaturity, like we need to grow up, we need to become mature. And I think, Justin, you and I were in such, growing up, we were in such a better position than the majority of our peers and the majority of culture, because we had a father and mother who were not perfect. We can be the first to explain our parents' faults, just like they can be the first to explain ours. but they loved God, and they grew, and they changed, and they matured, and they discipled us. And we both entered into ministry very young, but we didn't try, but we were always discipled by our father in ministry. Like we've never done ministry without our dad. And I think that helps people grow up. That's what discipleship is, right? That is the older man teaching the younger man. That is the older woman teaching the younger woman. That's literally what discipleship's supposed to be. And the parent relationship with a child is exactly how it's supposed to look.
Mm-hmm.
Our friend Alex, he's over in the Midwest. He's written a book on manhood. I've read it. It's very good. It's better than It's Good to Be a Man by Michael Foster, for any of those who are listening that might be interested in it when it comes out. But he speaks so highly and with such with the utmost respect of the man he calls his spiritual father. And without that man in Alex's life, he would have gone off the rails if he even stayed on them. And he helped ground him in what it looked like to study the Bible, and what it looked like to take people seriously, what it looked like to disagree, and how to converse about that. There's a growing up process through discipleship with older men that is severely lacking in our generation. And I think that we're starting to see this snowball effect, and I think it's gaining traction. And I think that you're right to write articles about this and address it, because I think I see it gaining traction. And without those discipleship type relationships, which are difficult and time consuming, it's not going to slow down if we can't course correct it.
It's probably the case that there's some daddy issues as well with a lot of these guys, kind of lack of good, solid, stable, consistent dad, or the surrogate spiritual father. Like in my case, my dad was a non-believer. My dad had some pretty significant issues, and eventually he left. And so I don't look back and see my dad as being a very positive, consistent influence in my life. But the Lord in his mercy brought wonderful, dear, older men, both that were my dad's age, but also that were like my grandfather's age, who functioned as these kind of surrogate spiritual fathers that I'm grateful for. I think I was actually having a conversation with my son. We were driving home from youth group tonight, and I was telling him about this wonderful, sweet, older, godly man who's older than my grandparents. He passed away several years ago, and just talking to my son about this man's influence in my life, and how grateful I am for him, and the time we spent having breakfast talking about poverty of spirit, and just having him disciple me through a fairly difficult season of my life. But God brought those men, and so I have a fondness toward them. But I'd be curious to know a lot of these guys' kind of lack of good spiritual fathers, especially early on in their life, and how much that affects the way they treat these older godly men now.
Yeah, I think, Justin, I'm going to let you talk. I promise. I freaking promise. But
I'm not going to lose my thoughts.
Okay, good. Because I will lose mine. And I think that I was going to bring this up earlier, and then I literally forgot it until you said what you just said. But I think that that's so evident in like the Twitter storm about the fact that James White and who was it, Brian Sauvé or whoever, had a phone call. They had a phone call, and guys, they made up.
Yeah,
Eric Kahn, guys, they made up. It's like, first off, why did it have to come to that? First of all. And second of all, why is this an abnormality? This is what younger men are supposed to do with older men, is have those relationships. And why does it take one internet theology guy and another internet theology king, to have that connection? He should be having that connection locally, and maybe he does, and I don't know, but I think it would be more evident. But whatever. It's like why is that a big deal? It shouldn't be a big deal.
One of the things in the article back in April, you're very clear. I was outlining your walk into the young, restless, and reformed movement back at.
I think we should just call it your
back at the beginning of the two. Well, they're both your, so we're trying to avoid. You have to
No, the second one is Yerp.
young, restless, and red pill.
The
They
new,
gotta-
the
Yeah,
shorthand
I
is the new. The shorthand is the old YRR and the new YRR.
So the old YRR, which I would say technically was something we were all a part of. So
Yeah.
back then I was consuming all that I could, coming from Resurgence, coming from Wilson, coming from
The Resurgence.
Driscoll,
Remember
Chandler.
that thing? Oh,
Yeah,
man.
no, I remember it. I still have the archived website stuff. I still have a ton of the free resources, which are still awesome to this day. And I'm consuming all of that, but the difference is, I think what we have now, and this maybe you can help me. Maybe you can tell me how this sounds in your estimation, Andrew.
I'm just dropping things over here. I apologize.
Yeah, we're ignoring you. The difference, I think, for me was I was consuming all that and engaged with that theologically, but it wasn't my community. And I think there's a real issue with the internet now and the distance between some of these guys looking towards some of these real. It's not necessarily manosphere guys inside of the church. It's more like, I don't know, patriarchal kind of guys only. Yes, I understand. Patriarchy is just a way to understand responsibility inside of complementarianism, which is great and biblical. But I don't know how to explain it, because they're not manosphere guys. They're like patrios guys or whatever. It's something different. They're not Andrew Tate. That dude is a wackadoo. I don't want them to be lumped in with them. But I feel like they look to these men. They don't have a relationship with them, and they're not in a solid community outside where they're able to actually grow in the word and take these ideas and put them into a practical application. And I feel like I did have that, which is why, I was a jerk anyway, but I wasn't like a jerk in some of the ways that I saw some of even my friends who were becoming young, restless, and reformed, 24 years ago. They didn't have the same community I did. And so they had some of the same kind of reactions we're seeing from this younger generation as well. I think it's a community issue.
I think it's what's lacking in the community. So we've kind of already addressed one thing, that where there's a lack of a kind of fatherly mentor, older men discipling, which for younger men, right? The job. So I look at my boys, and I see in my boys a strength and a desire to fight and a kind of physicality that needs to be tempered. And I know that as a dad, my job is to help them do that, right? My job is to help them control their strength in the way they interact with one another. Because if I just let them fight and let them go off however they want, they'll hurt each other. So I need to help them temper their strength. I need to help them temper their strength in the way they deal with girls. I'm constantly telling my boys, it's a little less now because I've been deliberate, but your sister is not a boy. You can't treat her the way you treat one another or one of the guys. And it's my older boys kind of fancying a girl at church. I've had to tell him she's not a dude. She's not a bro. You can't treat her the same way. So boys need men to help them temper their masculinity. And in the same way, Christian boys need Christian men to help them temper their spiritual, emotional vitality, their virility, they want to. I remember being in my 20s, and especially as I was totally captured by Reformed theology, I remember thinking, I'm going to go and I'm going to change every church, and everyone that's doing something wrong, I'm going to correct them, and I'm going to be the theology police. And I was so invigorated by this new theology that I discovered, a new high exalted holiness of God and his word. But I had older men who were tempering me, even though I made mistakes and said a lot of silly things and operated from a position of pride. I saw these older men coming alongside me saying, buddy, that's uncalled for. That's not right. That's too much. And so a good community where older men can help temper that matters. And so I wonder where that's lacking. The other thing that's different this time around is, coming out of the COVID era, we have a greater awareness of churches and pastors that failed us in several ways. where the initial YRR movement, if you think about men who kind of, the soft preaching, seeker sensitive preaching, we could pick those guys, right? That the Bill Hybels and the Rick Warren and the emerging church stuff, we could see that. But you and your church back home, if your pastor is faithfully preaching the word, it's not like you look at him and say, oh man, you've really failed me. But in the last 5 years, if we think about the number of churches that shut their doors indefinitely, that force their people to wear masks, that really, push the whole, get jabbed if you want to join in fellowship, it was most churches, the vast majority of churches. So this time around, a lot of guys that get really captured by this theology that's new for them, they survey the church landscape, and what do they see? Well, almost everyone has failed in this regard. Almost everyone hasn't been faithful. And so it's much more difficult for them to think of even their own home church and say, oh, my pastor's been faithfully plodding on in a smaller church, preaching the word, discipling people. Is he a super Calvinist? Maybe not, but, whatever. He preaches the word and he understands the scriptures. And so lack of community is one thing. And overall, I think failure in the church leads to it. The other thing is a lot of the problems that the original YRR movement were supposed to deal with were not dealt with. So feminism has taken an even stronger foothold in the church than it did 20 years ago. And the effeminacy we see in the church is much more rampant than it was. The kind of relativism and postmodern thinking, the very hyper experiential thinking, it also hasn't gone away. So you have, 2 more decades of these ideologies which were taking root, hence the original YRR movement. They haven't gone away. And in many ways, they've intensified as they've intensified in the culture. So a lot of these guys might be looking to that also and saying, hey, we haven't dealt with it, right? The barbarians are now at the gate. We haven't addressed these problems properly. So I think there's a number of factors that lead to why it's more intense this time around. But it definitely seems more intense this time around. And much more the way that Christians are treating one another this time around also seems a little more intense than 25 years ago.
We both take a breath at the same time. I don't know what's going on in your mind, and you don't know what's going on in mine. It's really weird.
So go ahead. Speak.
I may have forgotten. Oh no. Well, and I think Andrew, like, I think one of the reasons that, like, it grieves me that we're seeing these trends and you're identifying these trends. One of the reasons it grieves me is because, during the COVID times and all the conversations that we've had with our Canadian brothers and sisters, and watching the ministries happen regardless, watching the ministries grow in many cases across theological camps. Like, I looked at that moment in time, and it was such a beautiful thing because there was a unity, there was a common enemy. It was let's go fight the bad guys. And now in peacetime, as you say, we have the luxury of getting a little bit sloppy. And I think that, not that we always need to be hyper vigilant and on guard. I mean, scriptures tell us to pray for peaceful times so that we can go about and live our lives in peace. And I think that that's perfectly fine. So we shouldn't deride peacetime, but we should not use peacetime as opportunities to inflict wounds on ourselves. Mm-hmm. Because the next time the enemy rears its head, you're going to be far less effective if you're going into that fight having disfellowshipped yourself or created these barriers. Maybe not disfellowshipped, that's a kind of a strong word, but created these weird nitpicky barriers during the peacetime. It don't make no sense. Make it make sense to me.
Yeah, there's a fight coming for us. There is I mean, I'll just specifically here in Canada, although down there in the States, listen, guys, I'm being honest. Whatever happens in November, I don't see how one way or another, that is not the beginnings of some form of civil war. Whether he wins or not, I just don't, it's like, I can't imagine that it's just going to kind of go quietly into the night either way. But even here in Canada,
Alfredwarehouse.com, everybody.
Yeah. It's like, I think about what's happening down there. I think what's happening up here in Canada, specifically in our context. I mean, our elected officials continue to debate and push legislation that essentially will outlaw Christian thinking, that will make, speech protections erased, that will enshrine all sorts of hate speech, garbage. I mean, it's so there's a fight that is coming for the church that will require not only faithfulness and not only steel spines, but what we've forgotten so quickly is that men with whom we disagreed in a number of areas theologically, we were, at least in my case, literally, and I use that word correctly, literally linking arms on a snowy Ottawa street while police officers from around the country were pushing us back with riot shields and firing tear gas at us. So we literally were linking arms, standing while we were being beaten and assaulted by police officers, while snipers had their guns pointed at us, while sound grenades were going off around us. And we didn't agree in theological ways, but I remember us linking arms and then crying together, and then having a buddy who's a Presbyterian give me his keys and say, I feel like I might get arrested, take my keys, let my wife know. Like we were in the fight together, and like we've forgotten that. And that, like, as if that's not going to happen again, it is going to happen again, probably more intense next time.
Yeah.
And if we think that we're going to be able to push back in our even more truncated camps, it's not going to go well for us. We can't afford that kind of disunity.
Yeah, like the Billies are going to look like the Gospel Coalition, just discussing tactics and parapets instead of fighting on the ground. And
with better theology,
but
the same level of impractical.
But if orthodoxy doesn't lead to orthopraxy, then
correct.
What are you talking about? All right, I'm going to let you talk. I'm done.
No, I mean,
you saved your thoughts.
One of the things that I was kind of curious, because I want to make sure we don't lose the listeners at this point, because at this point
it's a rousing conversation. If they're lost, they were lost to begin with.
It's just about that point in time where people are like, you know what?
So we got to talk about the Jews now? Is that how we're going to really spice this up?
Wow, those darn Jews.
Oh,
yeah, but the pager thing though,
the Grim Beeper, the Grim Beeper. No. So I know you've got more. You've got more coming out that you're working on. By the way, you can go to Substack. This is the Maple Theonomist. That's what Andrew pens under on Substack. The Maple Theonomist.
And he's not even post mill.
And you can. I know, it's crazy, but you can check that. You can check out his writings there on Substack. I know you have more coming out on this. Is any of it so thus far? Really, the first article's goal was to kind of say, hey guys, I feel like there's a level of immaturity here that we can grow past. Your second article kind of says, I'm actually a little more concerned that we're walking away from biblical teaching on how we actually interact with each other. Is there any way in which you have recommendations for us to interact with people like that in our own lives? Because I got to tell you, the scripture is very clear. We want the youth's energy engaged with the wisdom of the old people in our churches. Like, that's what we need to be doing. That's what the Bible literally tells us to do. So how do we speak to them in a way that can really harness that energy into the most effective direction?
So I think one of the things I would say is that even if they're not aware of this, we need to stop taking our cues, and we need to stop adopting ideologies that are actually worldly and try to baptize them Christian. and I see a lot of that happening now. You know, this whole post-war consensus, Churchill was the chief villain of World War II, Hitler was misunderstood. That didn't originate among Christian thinking. There's pagans who push this nonsense, and now, oh well, maybe we can address it. Even I am not, I think, what I would traditionally call a Zionist. I'm not that. I'm not sending money to Israel to rebuild the temple. I don't think they're God's chosen people. I don't think that we need to gather up the red heifers for the impending sacrifices. That's not me. However, there's a kind of anti-Semitism that is not rooted biblically. Martin Luther included in it all. He's an interesting character. I don't think we can just say he was anti-Semitic and then be done with it. But there's stuff in the world that we're bringing into the church, and it's coming into the church. And part of the so a guy like Andrew Torba, for example, who, for anyone who doesn't know, he's the creator of Gab. A guy like Andrew Torba, some of the stuff he posts, he's like, Aristotle was right that multi-ethnic countries are bad, and oh look, I'd rather be in Poland because it's 98% white, and oh look at this, Hitler was a Christian prince. Like, he's bringing this stuff in from the world, and he's baptizing it Christian. And I think we need to encourage people that if we're going to have a worldview understanding, I think we need to stop pulling from sources in the world, right? So, for example, and some people might disagree with me, I think that Jordan Peterson, for example, I think Christians should have nothing to do with his writing or his thinking. I mean, in terms of maybe some of his political analysis, I think in some ways he's addressing some of the ills of statism. But when it comes to philosophy and theology and ethics, I think Peterson needs to be abandoned because he's not operating from a biblical worldview. And you cannot take from the poison well and think that you're going to be able to drink that down and it's not going to affect you in some way.
Yeah, we don't need Jordan Peterson to understand biblical ethics.
No. And so
no, we
so
do need him to understand biblical ethics.
We need him to understand biblical ethics.
But
Yes.
we don't need
correct.
As Christians don't require.
Yeah, we need him to get saved. So I think the source of our information and the source of our worldview matters, and that's one way we can help.
So that basic question of where are you getting this kind of question?
Yeah. And they might not even be aware of it. So the amount of guys, the amount of even professing Christian guys who are starting to make the case for some sort of polygamy or polyamory because it's not explicitly forbidden in the scriptures except for kings and elders, and because men are sexual beings and we've been made biologically by God to spread our seed and blah 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 blah. That's not coming from the scriptures. That's coming from these red pill bros, these chads in the manosphere who are pushing that. So they need to be aware of where this stuff is coming from. And if it's coming from the world, we need to leave it in the world. We can't just baptize it. And that would be one thing we can do. I mean, conversations matter, like having real robust conversations about these things. Like I know at my church, there's a group of younger, kind of early 20s, theologically minded men who might, take in the King's Hall podcast from time to time, who might be warm to some of these things. And so as a guy who's, a little bit older, I look at them and think, okay, these are guys I want to disciple. I want to meet with them. I want to invite them in my home. I want them to see me love my wife, love my kids, order my house. I want them to talk theology with me. I want to share with them what I've learned. And so actually taking an interest in investing in their lives and showing them what real faithfulness looks like the real costly biblical faithfulness doesn't always look like, and I don't think it's primarily marked by owning the libs, clickbaity stuff on X, inflammatory comments just to get the ratios up, that's not really what biblical faithfulness looks like. And we need to show them what it looks like, and we need to model it for them. Then we need to call this stuff out where we see it. And I mean, I know for a fact that there are guys who do not like some of the stuff I've said. I know there are guys, specifically some of the guys we've mentioned, who have called me a slanderer on social media, guys who've said some pretty awful things about me. And like I said in the second article, since the Lord saved me, I've devoted my life to loving and studying the scriptures and to helping other people do the same. And I'm not going to let some immature Theo bros stop me from doing what I believe is right. And I'm going to keep doing it. And they're going to have to have a conversation or grow up. And if they're at some point, we need to say, hey, be warm and well fed. I hope you smarten up, but I've said all I can say.
Kick the dust off your feet and keep on ministering.
Yeah, and I have a family that needs to be discipled. I have a church where, as a layman at my church, I have responsibilities to serve and use my gift and edify the body. I have younger men that I'm discipling. I have, in the context of my church, students I'm teaching and helping to develop a good worldview. And so I have the ground where the Lord has placed me, and I don't see my online presence, my social media platform, as being primary at all. It's something the Lord's given me, and I will utilize it and hope to be a benefit to the church. But if I had to choose between being completely anonymous and serving faithfully in my church, or still having some sort of platform with some sort of knownness about me, that's an easy decision. I would say goodbye to the platform in a heartbeat and just focus on faithfully serving my brothers and sisters in Christ locally.
Well, Andrew, you'll always have a platform in our hearts here at the Carpe Fide podcast.
That makes it all worth it.
Yeah,
we don't platform
jewels in the
anyone.
crown. Jewels in the crown.
We don't platform anybody here at Carpe Fide. Okay, the reality is anybody can come on and talk to us about anything. It's just,
Well, you need a
if you have
platform in
bad
order to
ideas-
platform people.
no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We're not platforming anyone. Anyone can come on. It's not like we have particular people we have to put on. Like if that crazy,
I don't really want to talk to heretics.
I know, I'd love to engage with heretics.
I just don't have the time.
You know what? That's fine. I'm just not going to get into it. It was an interesting idea that I was struck with today
We're
by
not like that
somebody
Bible
talking
Dingers
about
podcast.
platforming, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Let me talk about that, like platforming. Yeah, I don't think platforming is the right word that we should be using. Like, I'll let somebody with bad ideas come on the Carpe Fide podcast, so I can tell them their ideas are bad. Like the lady that wrote that Christianity Today article. I'd love to have her on and help her understand how her ideas are unwise.
That would be hilarious.
But nonetheless, Andrew, that's neither here nor there. So I've tried to be very clear on that. People can find you at the Maple Theonomist on Substack. Is there anywhere else that they can connect with you if they have any more thoughts about the new YRR? YRR?
The new year. Yeah. So Substack. So the mapletheonomist.substack.com. That's where I write. I try to post stuff once a week. I also record my blog via audio for people who want to listen to it, and they can find that if they're interested on Podbean as well. But I also have an audio link on the Substack. So that's
very convenient, by the way. Very convenient.
Well, I see what Doug Wilson's done with Blog and Mablog, and I'm like, it's so brilliant recording your blog for audio. I mean, people are driving. And so that's there. That would be one place people could if they want to read my thoughts. That's where that stuff comes out. The Maple Theonomist is also on Facebook and X. My personal Twitter or my personal X is where a lot more of my spicy thoughts in general come out that may not be of the Maple Theonomist variety, but that's kind of where I don't hold back as much. But really that's the place where I spend time thinking and writing, and it helps me. I found that even before there was a blog platform years and years ago, I just began the process of writing for my own sake, to put my thoughts down, to help me make sense of stuff, is an outlet for me. And then I thought, we'll start putting stuff out. So This week, I don't know when this is going to air, but this week in real time, as of time of recording, I'm releasing a post on Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada, which is basically Indigenous Orange Worship Day. And I'm talking about that. Then the next week I'm planning on talking about the importance of legacy, biblical legacy, talking about the original sin in the garden of the temptation. Did God really say? And talk about how all sin ultimately is Satan questioning God's word and God's goodness. So stuff like that. Talking about politics, obviously, as elections come up, there's going to be some political stuff that needs to be discussed. Yeah, that's where people can find me. And
Perfect.
if they really like it, if they read it and they're like, wow, this is good, this is encouraging, this is then they can also become a paid subscriber, which I will not deny. I won't say no to that.
Yes, so you can continue the supporting of his ability to take time out to do podcasts like this and actually write the articles, because let's face it, none of us have enough time.
We are all strapped.
So that is awesome. Andrew, I appreciate you coming on. And as you dive deeper into the new year, we will probably have to have another conversation. It's fun to say.
I like it, the new year.
Yeah. It makes me want to sing a
Hey there,
Christmas carol.
Homestar. How you doing in the new year?
Yeah, it makes me want to sing a Christmas song and get some eggnog out and start getting ready for the new year.
I already had a conversation with someone recently about making eggnog lattes and spiking them with whiskey. So I'm already there.
You could just try the Carpe Fide recipe for eggnog, which is
I didn't have it when you guys were up there at the church at War because of the crazy snowstorm. Remember,
that was
it ended up happening, but I'll be missing it again.
I'll send you the recipe, and then you can.
Can't, but it's different. You guys, your dairy's different down there. Your cows are different. The milk is different.
We got all the hormones in our milk, baby.
Heavy whipping cream and half are relatively similar,
and
whiskey. Be fine. And whiskey, yeah, you got perfectly good maple whiskey. You can put some brown sugar bourbon up in that thing. It'll be fantastic, I promise. We send you that 100. It's over 100 years old, this recipe, so we'll get it to you. That's all I got, though.
Yeah, send it. I'll try it.
That's all we have to offer.
That's good. But I appreciate your time, and definitely check out the Maple Theonomist. There's way more good content than trying to dissect this YRR. Not that this isn't important, just that there's a lot of good content because Andrew's been writing for a bit.
It's what all the geniuses do. They write to get their thoughts out because if their 100%. Brains would swell if they kept it inside.
100%. So definitely go check that out. Also, you can get 10% off if you use code CF10 on offgridwarehouse.com. Just wanted to say that. And with that, dear Christian, we hope that you this day would seize the faith.